Ah, the natural cycle of boom and bust. The USA has been going through the longest period of positive growth in its history. This means that usually a recession would have happened by now, but it hasn't. This doesn't mean that it's going to, as there could be something about the modern economic environment that means that demand can be inflated for a lot longer, and it may be another 2 years or more before a recession. We can never know for sure. However, there is a sign that a US recession is coming. That sign is the inversion of the yield curve of US Treasury securities. The first time it inverted since the Great Recession was on December the 3rd last year, when the 5-year yield fell a little below the 3-year yield. Recently, in the last week, when measured with the 10-year Treasury bonds against the 2-year bonds, it has happened twice, and the 10-year versus 2-year is considered particularly significant. Ordinarily, when someone loans money to the government by buying a bond, note or other security, they expect greater interest for longer-term maturity bonds than shorter-term maturity bonds, and the theory behind this can be summarised as investors wanting to be rewarded for the accumulated risk of holding on to an investment for a long time, given inflation and other factors. But when investors believe that an economic downturn is coming, shorter maturity bonds will be seen as more risky instead, so more of them will flock to the long-term securities which don't need as high yields to appeal to them, and the yields on the short-term instruments will increase at the same time. When the yields on short-term instruments become higher than those on long-term ones, this is the yield inversion, and it's said to predict a recession in the next 12 to 24 months, with the number varying depending on who you ask. The length of the inversion itself matters. Credit Suisse says that the 10 and 2-year inversion has given 2 false signals out of 8 since 1978, and needs to be inverted for at least 11 months to correctly predict a recession. Another sign of at least a slowdown would be the US and China ramping up their trade war against each other. I said from the beginning of his presidency that if Trump went as far as his rhetoric it would be absolutely disastrous, but up until relatively recently his tariffs have been tepid and weak in scale. Although they have caused the expected negative effects, it has more than been cancelled out by the boost Trump's tax cuts gave the US economy. Although with recent efforts, great harm has been done to American soybean farmers in particular. If the trade war against China continues to ramp up and both sides escalate, then that is something for investors to worry about, and it could cause a slowdown, if not a recession. The global economy has been getting into some pretty exotic stuff since 2008 as well, such as negative interest rates, and we haven't really seen how that will pan out in the long term since it's unprecedented. This is about as far as my barely educated speculation could go when it comes to the signs of a recession, so let's move on to speculating on the political implications if we do actually have a recession. If there is only a minor recession, it might not have too much of an effect. Few recessions are like the one in 2008. If we did have a massive recession, then it's clear who the losers would be in the Anglosphere at the very least. 2-term presidents are typical historically, but a massive recession combined with an already unpopular president who has been reacted to with unparalleled vitriol may be enough to make Trump a 1-term president. Without a recession, Trump will probably be able to coast on history while the Democrats squabble. A gigantic recession may be enough to shake things up, especially if Trump's tariffs are seen as partly responsible, as this affects his base, many of whom are farmers. They may be reliable and loyal, but not infinitely so. If Trump loses because of a recession, I expect the Democratic Socialists of America to be the big winner and gain more influence in the Democratic Party, pushing it further left. Even though protectionism is the economic issue with Trump, and not so much free market capitalism, the cultural power of socialism will be bolstered in America, and once it is bolstered in America, the same will go for the rest of the Anglosphere. If the recession occurs after or during a no-deal Brexit, then even if the claims of disaster were scaremongering in isolation, whatever level the recession cuts to will be seen to have been exacerbated by Brexit. The losers will be the populist right. Just as the left entered a triumphalist phase during Obama and his second term brought forth the rise of the SJW, I expect the cultural war to be massively accelerated even if the actual recession itself is relatively mild. People always narrative spin, so no matter who is actually at fault in a complex anti-inductive system, there will always be someone around to be the fall guy. If there's a global recession coming, then I think the right-wing pushback will be reversed, and the existing leftward direction of American and European history will continue and accelerate. But who knows, I'm not psychic.